It really makes you think, doesn't it? Amoxicillin. Such a common name. You hear it all the time. So many prescriptions flying around, especially for kids.
Oh, definitely.
It's right up there as one of the most frequently used antibiotics, across the globe.
Yeah.
From simple earaches to, well, more significant bacterial infections, it's like a real frontline defender in medicine.
It has become an absolute mainstay, yeah. And it's very commonness, its ubiquity is what makes a deep dive into its story so compelling right now, I think.
Right.
To understand not just that it works, but, how it works, why it became so prevalent, and maybe what its future looks like.
Absolutely. And for this exploration, we've got a fantastic collection of resources that you, our listener, shared with us. Really great stuff. We're talking about the ins and outs of how much it actually costs to make it.
Yeah, the economics.
Yeah, and the official word from the FDA on prescribing Amoxicillin, some really in-depth research papers, are the expert summary from Stat Pearls.
That's a handy one.
Very handy. Even a lab testing guide from USP, plus a look at market trends, how it works in the body, the pharmacology, and a bunch of scientific articles digging into crucial related issues, like antibiotic resistance.
Which is huge.
Huge.
So our goal here is to take that wealth of information, all these different pieces, and really distill it down for you, to pull out the most important nuggets and kind of weave them together in a way that's not only informative, but hopefully genuinely engaging.
Yeah, like a shortcut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want to give you that shortcut to feeling truly knowledgeable about amoxicillin without getting totally lost in, all the technical jargon.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where should we start? Maybe back in the beginning. It wasn't always the first choice, was it?
No, not at all. Amoxicillin was actually a product of the early 1970s. It was developed by Beecham Research Laboratories.
Beecham, right.
Yeah. And this was a significant step because it offered a leg up compared to ampicillin, which came before it.
Ah, ampicillin. Okay.
The big win, the key improvement, was that amoxicillin was absorbed much more effectively when you took it by mouth, orally.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't just like a slightly different version.
Yeah.
There was a clear practical advantage for patients taking it.
Precisely. That ease of oral administration, just taking a pill or liquid, made a huge difference clinically.
Right.
And it's important to remember its family tree, so to speak. Amoxicillin is a semi-synthetic penicillin.
Semi-synthetic, meaning?
Meaning it starts with a natural penicillin structure, but it's modified in the lab. It belongs to the aminopenicillin family, which is a subgroup within the broader beta-lactam antibiotic class.
Beta-lactam, okay.
Essentially, it built upon the core mechanism, the way penicillin itself worked, which was, revolutionary back then.
Which, if we break it down simply, is basically that it messes with the bacteria's ability to build their cell walls.
Right.
Stops them from building properly.
That's the fundamental action, yeah. It interferes with that process. And amoxicillin first hit the market under the brand name Amoxil. That was back in 1972.
Amoxil. Okay, I remember that name.
Yeah, for a good stretch, that was the name people really associated with it.
But, I mean, that name isn't the only one we see today. Far from it. What changed?
Well, like with many drugs, the patent protection for Amoxil eventually ran out. It expired in 1998.
Ah, 98.
Yeah. And that was a really pivotal moment because it basically opened the floodgates.
Right.
Numerous other pharmaceutical companies could then start manufacturing and selling their own versions of amoxicillin.
These generics.
Exactly. That's why we now see so many different generic versions available. It really democratized access to the drug in many ways.
Made it cheaper, too, presumably.
Oh, almost certainly. That competition likely played a significant role in making it such a widely used and relatively affordable treatment option.
Okay, so it went from being this protected brand, Amoxil, to a widely available generic drug. Makes sense? Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what amoxicillin actually does once it's prescribed. What kinds of infections is it typically used for?
Okay, so according to the official FDA prescribing information for Amoxicillin, its main targets are infections of the ear, nose, and throat. Think strep throat, ear infections, that kind of thing.
The common stuff.
Yeah, the common stuff. Specifically, it's indicated for treating infections caused by susceptible strains. And this is a really key point. VAT-lactamase negative isolates of certain bacteria.
Okay, hold on. Beta-lactamase negative. That's a bit of a mouthful. What does that actually mean in terms of how amoxicillin works or doesn't work?
Right. Think of beta-lactamase as a kind of defensive enzyme, like a shield that some bacteria produce.
Okay.
This enzyme shield can actually break down and deactivate certain antibiotics, including penicillins like amoxicillin. So when we say lactamase negative,
It means the bacteria don't have that shield.
exactly.
Yeah.
They don't produce that specific enzyme, making them vulnerable, susceptible to amoxicillin's attack on their cell walls.
Got it. And which bacteria are we talking about, the ones without the shield?
These susceptible bacteria include species like Streptococcus pneumonia. That's a really common one for pneumonia and ear infections.
Right.
Some types of Staphylococcus spp and Haemophilus influenza.
Okay. So it's effective against specific types of bacteria that haven't developed that particular defense mechanism yet. What other kinds of infections does it treat?
It's also frequently used, a go-to really, for infections of the genitourinary tract. UTIs, for example.
Okay, UTIs. And I remember reading something in the sources about its use in treating stomach ulcers. That seems different from an ear infection.
It is a different application, yeah, but a very important one nonetheless. Amoxicillin is actually a key component of combination therapies used to treat stomach and intestinal ulcers caused by a specific bacterium called Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori.
Ah, H. pylori. Heard of that.
Yeah, it's often used alongside other medications like clarithromycin and a proton pump inhibitor like lansoprazole that's known as the standard triple therapy.
Triple therapy, right.
Or sometimes it's used just with lansoprazole in what they call dual therapy. The whole goal is eradicating the H. pylori bacteria, which is the underlying cause of many ulcers.
So it's tackling the bacteria that can actually lead to stomach ulcers. That's fascinating. Now, thinking about who uses amoxicillin the most,
Yeah.
it really seems like kids get prescribed this a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Its effectiveness and, crucially, its safety profile in pediatric patients are very well established, very well documented over decades. It's a common treatment for typical childhood infections like skin and soft tissue infections, like impetigo or cellulitis.
Right.
Respiratory tract infections like pneumonia and bronchitis, and, as we've mentioned, infections of the genitourinary tract.
Okay.
And interestingly, there's some research mentioned suggesting that in situations where intravenous ampicillin might typically be used for neonatal sepsis, serious infections in newborns, but maybe IV access is difficult or resources are limited, oral amoxicillin is being explored as a potentially safe and effective substitute when it's combined with another type of antibiotic called an aminoglycoside.
Wow, that could be a really significant benefit, especially in, like you say, resource-limited settings.
It really could be. It highlights the drug's versatility.
And speaking of versatility, when you pick up amoxicillin from the pharmacy, you notice it comes in all sorts of different forms.
It does, yeah. To cater to different needs in patient populations, especially kids who can't swallow pills, it's available in a whole range of oral dosage forms.
Like what?
You've got your standard capsules, regular tablets, then chewable tablets.
Great for kids.
Exactly. Dispersible tablets, which you can dissolve in water.
Oh, interesting.
Syrups, pediatric suspensions. Loads of options. There are even extended release formulations designed so you don't have to take it quite as often.
Less frequent dosing, yeah.
Yeah. It's worth noting, though, that an intravenous formulation, an IV form, might not actually be available in all countries. The oral forms are much more common globally.
So, lots of options to suit different patients, different situations. Are there any really crucial things people need to be aware of before starting amoxicillin? Any specific warnings or special considerations?
Yes, definitely. There are several important points to keep in mind. First off, if someone has infectious mononucleosis, often called mono.
Right, the kissing disease.
Yeah, that one. There's a very high likelihood, a high percentage of patients with mono who develop a skin rash if they take amoxicillin.
Oh, really?
Yes. Because of this strong association, it's generally not recommended for individuals who have mono.
Okay, good to know. What else?
Second, people with significant kidney problems, severe renal impairment specifically. If their kidney function, measured by something called the glomerular filtration rate, or GFR, is below 30 millimole to a minute,
Okay.
they will likely need their dosage adjusted downwards by their doctor. The kidneys clear the drug, so if they're not working well, the drug can build up.
Makes sense. Dosage adjustment for kidney issues? Anything else?
Also, it's important for people to know that some chewable amoxicillin tablets contain phenylalanine.
Phenylalanine. Why is that important?
Well, it's a specific concern for individuals who have a rare genetic disorder called phenylketonuria, or PKU. They can't process phenylaline properly, so they need to avoid sources of it, including certain medications.
Wow, okay, that's a really specific but vital detail for those patients. What about potential side effects? I mean, all medications can have them, right?
Absolutely. And one notable potential side effect associated with many antibiotics, amoxicillin included, is something called clostridioids, difficile-associated diarrhea, often shortened to CD.
CD, right. I've heard of that. Could be serious.
It certainly can be. It can range from just mild diarrhea all the way to a much more severe condition called pseudomembranous colitis, which is a serious inflammation of the colon.
Wow.
And it's really important to be aware that CD can occur not only while you're actively taking the antibiotic, but sometimes even weeks or months after the course is finished.
Months later. Seriously?
Yes, it can have a delayed onset. If it develops, the standard advice is to discontinue the amoxicillin, if possible, and specific treatment targeting the C. difficile bacteria itself might be necessary.
Okay, that sounds like something definitely to watch out for and report to your doctor if it happens. Anything else on the side effect front? Allergies.
Yes, hypersensitivity reactions are also a significant consideration, just like with any penicillin-based antibiotic.
The penicillin allergy thing.
Exactly. These reactions can range quite dramatically, from mild skin rashes to very severe, potentially life-threatening anaphylactic reactions.
Yeah, anaphylaxis, okay.
These severe reactions are statistically more likely in individuals who have a known history of allergic reactions to penicillin itself, or people who just generally have a tendency towards multiple allergies, hay fever, asthma, eczema, that sort of thing.
So if you're generally allergic, be extra cautious.
It's wise to be. And there's also a possibility of cross-reactivity with another class of antibiotics called cephalosporins. They're structurally related to penicillins, also beta-lactams.
So if you're allergic to penicillin, you might react to cephalosporins too.
It's possible, yes. Not guaranteed, but the risk is higher.
So it really underscores the importance of patients telling their healthcare providers very clearly about any allergies they have before starting any new medication, especially an antibiotic.
Absolutely crucial, full stop. And one more group, older patients. There's a particular consideration related to kidney function again.
Right, because kidney function can decline with age.
Exactly. As we age, our kidney function can naturally decrease, and since amoxicillin is primarily eliminated from the body by the kidneys,
It might stick around longer in older people.
precisely. So older individuals may require dosage adjustments, similar to those with pre-existing kidney disease, just to prevent the drug from accumulating to potentially harmful levels.
Okay.
And just as a technical note, amoxicillin can be partially removed from the body through dialysis, which is relevant for patients on dialysis treatment.
Okay. Good to know for that specific group. Right. We've covered a lot about what amoxicillin does, who uses it, and who needs to be cautious. Now let's shift our focus a bit to how this medication is actually manufactured. It's not something that's just like plucked from a plant, is it?
No, definitely not. As we mentioned, amoxicillin is semi-synthetic.
Right.
This means it starts with a naturally occurring substance, but that substance is then chemically modified in a laboratory setting to create the final drug.
And what's the starting point?
The fundamental chemical building block for amoxicillin is a molecule called 6-aminopenicillinic acid. It's often just abbreviated as 6-APA.
6-APA. Yeah.
So you see, a huge part of the process, the real brilliance maybe, lies in efficiently obtaining this central building block, the 6-APA nucleus. It's kind of like having the perfectly cut diamond. The rest of the jewelry making, while complex, becomes much more straightforward if you start with the right core piece.
Okay, I get the analogy. So where does this 6-APA itself come from? Is that natural?
So 6-APA is derived from penicillin G, which you might see abbreviated as PENG.
Ah, penicillin G, like the original penicillin.
Very closely related, yes. Penicillin G is the one that's typically produced through a fermentation process.
Fermentation, like making beer or yogurt.
Sort of, yeah. It typically involves growing a specific type of mold, usually Penicillium chrysogenum, in these huge vats under very carefully controlled conditions, temperature, pH, nutrients, oxygen.
Right.
Once enough penicillin G has been produced by the mold and then extracted, the next crucial step is to chemically snip off a specific part of its molecular structure, it's called the benzyl side chain, to isolate that core 6-APA nucleus we talked about.
Okay, so you grow pen G, then you snip off a piece to get 6-APA. And how was that snipping process, that removal, carried out?
Well, historically, this was often done using fairly harsh chemical methods, but the more common and, frankly, environmentally friendlier approach used today is enzymatic hydrolysis.
Using enzymes.
Exactly. This involves using a specific, highly selective enzyme called penicillin G acylase, sometimes known as penicillin amides.
And why is the enzyme route preferred now?
Several reasons. The enzymatic route generally operates under much milder reaction conditions. Think lower temperatures, more neutral pH. It's also more specific in its action, so you get fewer unwanted byproducts. And importantly, it generates less harsh chemical waste compared to the traditional chemical methods. So it's often seen as a more efficient and greener way to get to that key intermediate 6-APA.
Right. Milder, cleaner, more specific. Makes sense.
Exactly. And having a robust and efficient method for producing really high-quality 6-APA is absolutely critical, technologically and economically. Because remember, 6-APA serves as the starting material not only for amoxicillin, but also for a whole range of other important semi-synthetic beta-lactam antibiotics, like ampicillin itself, and some cephalosporins, too.
So the real cornerstone molecule for antibiotic production.
It really is.
Okay, so once you have your high-quality 6-APA, what are the general steps involved in turning that into the actual amoxicillin powder that ends up in the capsules or syrups?
Right. While the specific details of the chemical reactions to convert 6-APA into amoxicillin, basically attaching the correct new side chain, weren't extensively detailed in the materials you shared.
Okay.
They do outline the general downstream processes that follow the initial synthesis and purification of 6-APA. These typically involve those chemical modification steps I mentioned to attach the specific side chain that defines amoxicillin. Then you have crucial steps like separation and purification of the resulting amoxicillin compound.
How do they purify it?
This is often achieved through crystallization. Under the right conditions, the purified amoxicillin will form solid crystals, leaving impurities behind in the liquid.
Okay, like growing salt crystals.
Kind of, yeah, but much more controlled. These crystals are then separated from the liquid, often using large centrifuges spinning them really fast.
Right.
Then they need to be thoroughly dried to remove any remaining solvent or moisture. After drying, the pure amoxicillin crystals are often ground into a very fine, consistent powder. That powder is the final active pharmaceutical ingredient, the drug substance.
And that powder then gets put into the capsules or mixed into liquids.
Exactly. That final drug substance is then formulated mixed with other inactive ingredients, binders, fillers, flavoring agents for liquids, etc., and ultimately packaged into the various dosage forms we discussed earlier: capsules, tablets, suspensions.
Wow. It sounds like a really complex series of chemical and physical processes that need to be incredibly tightly controlled to ensure quality and purity.
Oh, absolutely. Pharmaceutical manufacturing is highly regulated for exactly that reason. Every step matters.
I also noticed in the source material some mentions about the economic aspects of producing amoxicillin. Reports analyzing the costs.
Yes, that's right. There are specialized firms, like Intratech was mentioned, that focus specifically on analyzing the economics of producing various chemical commodities, including pharmaceuticals like amoxicillin.
What kind of things do they look at?
Their reports apparently delve pretty deep into, first, the capital costs required to actually build an amoxicillin manufacturing plant from scratch.
So the initial investment.
Right. That includes things like the costs of designing and constructing all the different processing units within the factory, the reactors, the crystallizers, the dryers. Also, the infrastructure for storing raw materials and finished products, the utilities needed to run the plant, like generating steam, purified water, electricity.
Wow, everything.
Yeah, any necessary support buildings like labs or administrative offices, and just the overall site development costs. A huge upfront investment.
So a really comprehensive breakdown of what it takes just to get the factory built.
Precisely. And their analysis doesn't stop there. They also look very closely at the ongoing operating expenses, or OPEX. These are the continuous day-to-day costs of actually running the plant once it's built.
Okay, OPEX. Like what?
These are typically divided into variable costs and fixed costs. Variable costs are the ones that fluctuate depending on how much amoxicillin you're actually producing, the biggest one, usually being the cost of the raw materials like the PEN-G or 6-APA precursors, solvents, enzymes.
Right, the more you make, the more materials you use.
Exactly. And then you have the fixed costs, which are more or less constant regardless of the production volume, at least within a certain range. These are tied more to the plant's existence and capacity. Things like routine maintenance, administrative overhead, property taxes, insurance.
Got it. Variable and fixed costs. And ultimately, this allows them to figure out something called the product value. What's that?
Yeah, Intratech apparently uses that term product value to represent the minimum price at which the manufactured amoxicillin would need to be sold for the company operating the plant to achieve its desired rate of return on all the capital they've invested.
So the minimum profitable price.
Essentially, yes. It's the price needed to cover everything. This calculated product value has to encompass all those operating costs we just talked about, variable and fixed, plus the depreciation of the plant and all that expensive equipment over time.
Right. Things wear out.
Any corporate overhead expenses allocated to that plant, and crucially, that target return on investment, often called the return on capital employed, or ROCE.
ROCE, okay.
They even break down those operating costs further in their models, looking at specific components like the cost contribution from the starting materials versus energy and water utilities versus direct labor costs versus the cost associated with the wear and tear, the capital charges on the equipment. And there are also one-time startup expenses after construction, but before routine operation begins, things like operator training, temporary contract services, equipment testing, and validation.
It really gives you a much deeper appreciation for the significant financial engineering and investment that goes into producing even a relatively common and generally affordable medication like amoxicillin. It's not simple or cheap to make reliably.
Not at all. Consistency and quality at scale requires substantial investment and expertise.
Okay, let's shift gears again, if we can, and look at the regulatory journey of amoxicillin. We touched on the patent expiring, but what's been its path in terms of approvals and maybe some of the issues around that?
Sure. So, as we discussed earlier, that big turning point was the expiry of the original patent for Amoxil, held by Beecham, later GSK, back in 1998. Right. That, as we said, was the watershed moment that really paved the way for the widespread introduction of generic versions of amoxicillin. Suddenly, many different companies could get approval to make and sell it under numerous different brand names, or just as generic amoxicillin.
And that competition drove down prices.
Generally, yes. Increased competition in the pharmaceutical market almost always leads to lower prices over time, which in turn means greater accessibility for patients and healthcare systems.
Now, I noticed in the materials a specific mention of dispersible tablets, DTs. Why are those highlighted? What's special about them?
Yes. Amoxicillin dispersible tablets, or DTs, hold a particularly important place in global public health efforts, especially for children.
Okay.
The USP PQM GMP portfolio, that's a program under USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, focused on promoting the quality of medicines in lower and middle income countries.
Right.
Currently lists amoxicillin DT as a priority medicine. That designation signals its importance.
And why is it so important?
Primarily because the World Health Organization, the WHO, actually recommends amoxicillin DT, specifically in a 250 milligram dosage, as the preferred first-line treatment for childhood pneumonia.
Pneumonia in kids. Wow. Okay.
Yes, particularly in resource-limited settings where pneumonia is still a major killer of young children. Dispersible tablets are easier for kids to take than pills, and potentially easier to dose accurately than suspensions if mixing instructions aren't clear or clean water is scarce.
That really highlights its critical role in tackling a massive global health challenge.
Yeah.
But I also read in the sources about some difficulties, some bottlenecks, in actually ensuring that these quality-assured DTs reach the children who need them most, particularly in these high-burden countries.
That's a really crucial point to understand, yes. While there seems to be sufficient global manufacturing capacity for amoxicillin DT, companies can make enough of it. Ensuring a reliable, consistent supply of high-quality, affordable versions into the health systems of countries with a high burden of childhood pneumonia has proven to be a complex challenge. It's not straightforward.
What are the roadblocks?
Well, the sources suggest a few things. Some international manufacturers, even those making high-quality products, have apparently been hesitant to register their amoxicillin DT products in some of these markets.
Why hesitant?
Concerns cited include worries about the transparency or lack thereof of government procurement processes, sometimes very lengthy and unpredictable drug registration procedures within those countries, and just general perceived difficulties or risks in working directly with the public health sector in some places.
So the ability to produce it isn't the main bottleneck. It's more about the logistics, the registration, the market access side of things. getting it through the system and onto the ground.
Precisely. It's often a market dynamics and regulatory pathway issue, and this is where organizations like UNICEF place a vital role.
How so?
UNICEF often steps in to bridge this gap. They frequently establish long-term procurement agreements directly with manufacturers who have demonstrated a commitment to quality, often through WHO pre-qualification or similar stringent reviews, to secure reliable supplies of amoxicillin DT for these high-need markets.
Okay.
They also sometimes have to work proactively to secure import waivers or facilitate faster registration pathways to expedite the delivery of these essential medicines when outbreaks occur or stocks run low.
So UNICEF acts like a major buyer and facilitator.
In many ways, yes. And that WHO Good Manufacturing Practice Certification, or GMP, becomes really important here. It's often a prerequisite for manufacturers looking to supply to major international procurement organizations like UNICEF, as it provides a baseline assurance of consistent manufacturing quality standards.
It sounds like a really concerted, multi-pronged effort is needed then to ensure both the quality and the reliable access.
Absolutely. And the sources mention ongoing initiatives aimed at encouraging the national regulatory authorities, the NDRAs in different countries, to recognize and perhaps give more weight to these global quality designations like WHO GMP certification or WHO pre-qualification when they are reviewing applications for drug registration from manufacturers.
So streamline the process if a product already meets tough international standards.
That's the idea. It could potentially make it easier and faster for high-quality manufacturers to get their essential medicines, like amoxicillin DT, registered and available in more countries.
Makes sense.
And beyond the manufacturers and regulators, there's also a continued push for countries themselves to formally incorporate amoxicillin DT into their own national clinical treatment guidelines and their national essential medicines lists, or EMLs.
Embedding it into policy.
Exactly. And making sure the treatment of childhood pneumonia is genuinely prioritized within their national health policies and budgets. It takes commitment at all levels.
All of that makes perfect sense in terms of just making sure that people, especially vulnerable kids, can actually get the life-saving medications they need. Now, moving beyond the regulatory landscape, let's consider the broader economic impact of amoxicillin. We touched on manufacturing costs, but what about its role in the healthcare economy overall?
Economically, amoxicillin's impact is just enormous, primarily driven by its sheer volume of use.
Well, it's prescribed constantly.
Constantly. It's relatively low cost, combined with its proven effectiveness for a wide range of common infections, particularly in primary care settings, and for treating those common childhood infections. It just makes it an indispensable tool for healthcare systems pretty much everywhere. It saves money downstream by treating infections effectively early on.
And we mentioned those reports.
Right. Resources like the one from Procurement Resource offer these incredibly detailed financial analyses for anyone potentially looking to establish an amoxicillin manufacturing plant. They cover the whole spectrum from the cost of sourcing raw materials and transporting them to the initial capital investment needed for the factory, the CapEx, and then projecting the ongoing operating expenses, the OpEx, often right down to a cost per unit produced.
So the business case is well understood. And with so many generic manufacturers now in the market since the patent expired back in '98, I would imagine there's pretty significant price competition keeping costs down.
Indeed. The generic market for amoxicillin is known to be quite competitive globally, and this intense competition certainly contributes significantly to keeping prices relatively low compared to newer on-patent antibiotics. That's a huge benefit for healthcare affordability, for patients paying out of pocket, and for national health budgets.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed, related to the DTs, there are these substantial global initiatives, often supported by international donors and national government financing, aimed specifically at ensuring affordable access to quality-assured amoxicillin DT in those countries with the highest rates of childhood pneumonia. So there's an economic push there, too.
So it's this constant balancing act, isn't it, between being a cost-effective, widely available treatment and ensuring that quality and supply chains are maintained, particularly for those most in need globally.
That's a very good way to put it. Cost, quality, access. It's a three-legged stool, especially for essential medicines like amoxicillin.
Okay. Finally, let's think a bit about the cultural influence, maybe, of amoxicillin. How is it generally perceived by the public? Does its commonness affect how people think about antibiotics?
That's a really interesting and important aspect, actually, and the source materials did touch on this. Studies that have looked into public perceptions and knowledge about antibiotics have revealed some pretty widespread misconceptions.
Like what?
For instance, one study mentioned was conducted in the Netherlands. It found that nearly half of the survey respondents incorrectly believed that antibiotics are effective against viruses.
Half.
Wow.
Even though we know they only work on bacteria.
Exactly. And this was found even though the Netherlands generally has relatively conservative rates of antibiotic prescribing, especially for things like coughs and colds, which are predominantly viral respiratory infections.
And this isn't just a Dutch thing.
No, similar misunderstandings have been observed in studies conducted in the United States and other countries too. It seems to be a fairly common knowledge gap.
That's surprising and honestly a little concerning, isn't it? If people think antibiotics kill viruses.
It is concerning, yeah, because these kinds of misconceptions can be inadvertently reinforced, perhaps, in situations where maybe antibiotics are prescribed, perhaps unnecessarily, for illnesses that are likely viral but might have some bacterial component, or just to meet patient expectations.
Right, the patient demanding an antibiotic for a cold.
Exactly. This can create inaccurate expectations among the public about when antibiotics are actually needed and when they aren't helpful at all.
And that links to resistance, presumably.
Directly, because then there's the significant danger of individuals maybe taking antibiotics without a proper diagnosis or prescription, perhaps, using leftover medication from a previous illness for themselves or a family member.
Oh yeah, the leftover pills in the cabinet.
That behavior is a major, major driver of the escalating global problem of antibiotic resistance. Every unnecessary course of antibiotics gives bacteria another chance to evolve defenses.
And it's not just limited to human medicine either, is it? The sources mentioned amoxicillin plays a role in veterinary care too.
Absolutely. Amoxicillin is widely used in veterinary medicine as well. It's used to treat a whole range of bacterial infections in many different animal species, including food-producing animals like cattle and poultry, companion animals like dogs and cats, and even sometimes in exotic or wild animals under veterinary care.
And is resistance an issue in animals too?
Oh, very much so. The issue of antibiotic resistance, or antimicrobial resistance, AMR, is also an incredibly complex challenge in veterinary medicine and agriculture. There's a growing emphasis globally on promoting responsible and judicious antibiotic use in veterinary practices and in farming the One Health concept, recognizing the links between human, animal, and environmental health.
Oh, right.
In the United States, specifically for companion animals, it's apparently quite common for veterinarians to use medications in ways that are not specifically listed on the official product label. This is known as extra-label drug use.
Okay.
And this practice can sometimes include antibiotics like amoxicillin being used for conditions or species not explicitly approved on the label, which requires careful veterinary judgment.
So it's this really multifaceted issue that spans both human and animal health and the environment too.
Yeah.
And all of this ultimately connects back to that much larger looming global crisis of antibiotic resistance.
Exactly. It's impossible to talk about a workhorse antibiotic like amoxicillin today without discussing resistance. AMR poses a significant and, frankly, growing threat to global public health and security.
How so?
It fundamentally undermines our ability to effectively treat common infections. Things that were easily treatable just a few decades ago are becoming dangerous again. It leads to longer illnesses, higher hospital admission rates, increased healthcare costs,
Yeah.
and tragically, increased mortality. The projections suggest it has the potential to push millions more people into extreme poverty due to healthcare costs and lost productivity.
That's incredibly sobering.
It is. And addressing this crisis requires a truly concerted global effort. It involves international cooperation on surveillance to track how resistance is spreading, much better stewardship of the antibiotics we still have, investment in sanitation and infection prevention, and critically, the urgent development of new antibiotics, diagnostics, and alternative therapies. Amoxicillin's story is now intertwined with this much bigger challenge.
It really brings home the fact that even a seemingly routine, everyday medication like amoxicillin is right at the heart of this very complex and incredibly pressing global health challenge. It's not just a simple pill.
Indeed. You know, the journey of amoxicillin, from its initial development as an improvement over ampicillin through to its current widespread global use, it really represents a remarkable achievement in modern medicine. It saved countless lives. However, its continued effectiveness, the very thing that made it so valuable, is increasingly jeopardized by the relentless rise of antibiotic resistance. This makes responsible stewardship of this valuable resource by doctors, by patients, by everyone, Absolutely crucial.
Okay, so as we start to bring our deep dive into amoxicillin to a close, we've really covered a lot of ground. We've explored its historical development and how it improved upon earlier treatment.
It's enhanced oral absorption, yeah.
Exactly. Its wide array of clinical applications, from ear infections to H. pylori.
And pneumonia in kids.
Right. The intricate processes involved in its manufacturing, starting from Pen-G fermentation all the way to the finished pill.
The 6-APA intermediate, the purification.
The regulatory landscape that governs its availability, the patent expiry, the generic market, the focus on DTs.
And the challenges in access.
Its considerable economic impact, both in manufacturing costs and healthcare savings. And, maybe most importantly now, the crucial cultural context surrounding its use, especially viewed through the lens of the ever-growing threat of antibiotic resistance.
And what's particularly striking, I think, when you lay it all out like that, is how all of these different aspects are so deeply interconnected.
How so?
Well, for instance, economic pressures in the generic market can potentially influence manufacturing shortcuts or quality control, which in turn affects regulatory scrutiny and approval, and ultimately impacts patient safety and access down the line.
Right.
Similarly, the public's understanding, or perhaps more often misunderstanding, of how and when antibiotics work directly shapes usage patterns, like demanding them for viruses, which then has profound implications for the development and spread of resistance, affecting everyone. It's all linked.
It truly illustrates how digging into just a single medication, even a very common one, can offer this amazing window into so many interconnected facets of medicine, economics, global health, and even public perception.
It really does. And I think it leaves us, and hopefully you, our listener, with a pretty critical question to ponder.
Okay.
Given the absolutely pervasive use of amoxicillin, this drug we've just spent time exploring, and the simultaneously escalating challenge of antibiotic resistance that threatens its future effectiveness, what shared responsibility do we all bear as individuals, as patients, as healthcare professionals, as policymakers in ensuring that amoxicillin and antibiotics like it remain effective tools for generations to come?
That's a powerful question to end on, a shared responsibility.
I think it has to be. We really encourage you to reflect on the information we've discussed today, the history, the science, the economics, the challenges, and perhaps use it as a springboard to delve further into the complexities of antibiotic stewardship and the vital global fight against antimicrobial resistance. It affects us all.